Welcome back, and today I'm sharing the lessons that I learned from reading the book of Colossians 1 to 4 and Paul's letter to Philemon. I read them together and understood how they were put together chronologically because the story kind of flowed. And I'll just share with you, as usual, the lessons that I learned from reading these chapters. I just felt to, very strongly when I came on today to reiterate that I'm not a Bible scholar, not a Bible teacher. This is my first run through the Bible, page by page, book by book, in a year. And again, this whole endeavor was started to keep me accountable, to make sure that I was reading my Bible every day and studying it and getting the lessons which I'm sharing. And hopefully one day all this will help somebody. Now, that being said, let me dive right in. So, the letter that Paul wrote to the Colossians, he wrote while he was still in prison. And he was writing to a group of people that he had never met. From the research or the writings in my Bible, turns out that Paul had never, been to Colossae, that the church was started by Epaphras, who was a fellow servant with Paul, and he had come to Paul in prison and was telling him about them. Now, one thing that struck me was his description of the supremacy of Christ to the people in the letter. That was in verses 15 to 20. It was so clear and so beautiful. I just loved it, and I'd encourage you to read it again if you perhaps maybe skim through it. And some of the things that stood out to me was one, Christ is the mystery of God, and true knowledge of him will reveal all the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge, so that we won't be deceived by contrary arguments. And I thought that was very powerful. I mean, like many of Paul's letters, or all of Paul's letters actually, he's talking to the Christians of that time, but we see how the more things change, the more they stay the same, because they're still relevant to us today. And he also said Jesus is the fullness of the Godhead bodily. He's God, and we have the fullness that we need in Christ, who is head over every power and authority. He triumphed over them, principalities and powers, and he disgraced them totally when he rose from the dead after he went to the cross. Now, this is a very important verse because I've heard it preached over and over in church, and I had to be very intentional about imbibing it and making sure that I didn't have just verbal, assent, but heart knowledge of it. Is that we are hidden in Christ and in God. He's the source and the keeper of our lives. Now, when we accepted Jesus, we died with him, and so we should not submit anymore to the dictates of the world. Our lives are now in Christ, and we have a new and glorious future to look forward to in Christ. And I thought that was amazing, and that's in Colossians 3:4. So Paul sent this letter through Tychicus and Onesimus, right? And they were his fellow workers. But Onesimus is the one to whom the letter to Philemon is really about, or he sent the letter to Philemon through him. And it turns out that Onesimus was a slave who stole from him and then ran away, and then somehow ended up meeting Paul and accepting Christ and becoming a Christian. So he had changed, and he became one of Paul's assistants. Now, that whole story, or the letter to Philemon, to me, it just shows how God can unify people. So Paul sent Onesimus back to Philemon mainly for them to be reconciled and reunited after everything. I love how Paul offered to pay, Onesimus's debt to Philemon, and it did mirror Christ, because remember, Christ came and paid our debt, to our sin debt here on earth. One thing that came very heavily to me was just how wise Paul was. Like he was old now, writing this letter, and his wisdom was so evident in all the pages and the words of the letters. And I thought that was really Great. And Paul mirrored Christ's behavior here on earth quite a lot. And for me, I feel like that's what it truly means to be a Christian. It means mirroring Christ's behavior and being like him, acting like him, and you treating and loving others like him. And I thought that was amazing. Now here's my hashtag getting to know God lesson. Christ is the image of the invisible God. Possibly not in physical appearance, but certainly he is God, and he demonstrated that through his power and his actions. He's fully God in all things. And Jesus rules everything, and he has authority. And he brought the fullness of his deity to the cross and brought restoration to everything that he created. Remember, Jesus was in creation as well. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow's sharing will be from Ephesians, and I look forward to sharing with you here. Thank you so much for joining me today. God bless you.